Hi, I'm Dan Pinniger with Project Council Media, here outside of Washington, D.C. of the Georgetown Law School's first ever Cybersecurity Law Institute. And today with me is Tina Ayiotis. And Tina, you've had a lot of help putting this program together. We were just talking with Larry, and as a former deputy GC of a major technology company, you deal with cybersecurity issues all the time. So what was the goal in putting together the program?
Well, so to the extent that I've had the opportunity in the past to guest lecture in Georgetown's Corporate Counsel Institute and Advanced eDiscovery Institute, I knew the model and approached Larry about creating this standalone program that would be slightly different in that it would involve, in a very enhanced way, CIOs, CISOs, and other business folks with lawyers in terms of teaching. And at one point yesterday, there were 6 people on stage and only 1 lawyer. And it was the session about the government coming. And we had Sean Henry, former executive director of the FBI, moderating, talking about, he's with CrowdStrike now. I probably got his title all messed up because I also said he wasn't a real FBI agent, so I'm probably going to pay for that too. But he talked about what it's like working with government folks, and to the extent that we had the person playing the CIO and the CISO, along with the general counsel, and then having the person from FBI and DHS coming together. And I think for lawyers, that was a great way to learn as a lawyer how you would deal with that situation. Because a lot of conferences are very much just about, well, this is what the law requires you to do. And I think for in-house counsel, it's very helpful to have examples of how to act in particular scenarios. So Larry enabled us to bring a group together. So for co-chairs of the program, we have different constituencies represented. Greg Galopoulos, who's the General Counsel of General Dynamics, representing the in-house perspective. David McHugh, who prior global CIO at the company that I worked with, and really representing, and he was on the cover of CIO magazine, but really representing both the CIO community, CISO community, and the security concerns of an entity. And then Harriet, as outside counsel, partner at Hogan, but very recently in-house at IBM, the first chief privacy officer and counsel on security matters. So we have this, I think, and I'm biased, of course, because this is a program that I'm intimately involved with, but I think we have a wonderful diversity of perspectives and constituencies to bring together. And we wanted to emphasize the need to have collaboration within an organization. So on this topic, you can't be an effective in-house lawyer or even outside counsel if you're not connected very intimately with what's going on operationally on the security and IT side, and then how you work with government.
And of course, as they always say, the weakest link in the chain is your weakest link. So you obviously have to work with your entire company, your outside people, your vendors, your supply chain. And one of the things I've seen come out of this conference has been the concern that law firms sometimes have, and obviously corporations have concerns with their law firms, but law firms should also have concerns about their supply chain. Where they're storing the data at, whether it's up on the cloud, whether or not the terms of service are up to date and cover their protections. So the question is insurance going to cover it if there's a data breach?
Yeah, it's an interesting area of the law. I actually, many years ago, worked as an insurance coverage litigator on the policyholder side, so appreciate how, and this was covered in one of the panels yesterday, actually the last panel of the day, with Jody and John and Steve Walker, about how it used to be you just had comprehensive general liability policies that would cover everything. And then for directors and officers, that sort of got carved out as something very specific. And there was a due diligence and a real clarity specifically about what's covered and what's not covered. And I think you see the evolution of the very same thing that people would say, well, if something happens, it's covered under this comprehensive general liability policy, and now you're carving out the cyber piece. And there are obviously lots of, an audience member pointed out the 30% increase in cyber policies in the last chunk of time. But obviously, it's a new area. We haven't seen a lot of claims paid. And as Tony Sager pointed out at lunch, because he's a mathematician and he really connected with those actuaries, there's not a lot of data in this area. So I think what is probably pretty important for companies to think about is having nothing is probably not going to enable you to get a good risk rating from your insurer, because the insurers are now actually doing due diligence to really figure out how they're going to rate the risk to figure out what your premium is going to be.
Right. So the more security controls that a company has, the more security controls that a law firm even has, is going to help them. Absolutely. Not just with a practical matter, but maybe with insurance issues. Yeah.
And the other question that came up yesterday, which is very interesting, for certainly large organizations doing contracts, you know, it's sort of par for the course. Within the contract, there's a requirement for a certain level of coverage in particular areas. What's going to be interesting to see is whether coverage around cyber will become part of the norm within contracts, just because this supply chain issue of, if something happens, I want to know you have some coverage because I've put my data in your custody. And if something happens, I'm on the hook because it's my information, either my company's information or my customer's information. But I want to know that you're going to have coverage because I'm going to come after you.
Absolutely. Everybody's looking for the deepest pocket and down the chain.
Who's responsible?
Yeah.